Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the final lecture of the 2011 Food for Thought Luncheon Lecture Series. I'm Mary Kay Cooper, Director of Alumni Relations. This series is sponsored by the San Antonio Alumni Chapter and coordinated by the Alumni Office. The series is designed to spotlight Trinity's outstanding faculty. Before we get to today's talk, I would like to tell you about an upcoming event. On May 10th, Trinity's Ensemble in Residence, the Soli Chamber Ensemble, will perform an evening of dance music, Soli style. DJ Soli will create a club atmosphere for you to dance to. In your seats, please. Classic favorites will include Bartok, Stravinsky, Mackie, and more. Cost is $20 or free with a Trinity ID. The pre-concert talk begins at 7 p.m. The concert begins at 7:30 with a Meet the Artist reception following the concert. The concert takes place in the Ruth Taylor Recital Hall. We are pleased to have several special Trinity people with us here today, and I want you to be able to recognize at least one of them. She is Ms. Penelope Harley, wife of University President Dennis Alberg, who I think I always manage to catch while she's chewing.
And he's on a plane back from Boston.
He is. President Alberg was at a reception in Boston with alumni last night. Now, I want to remind everyone that this program is being recorded so that people all over the world can view or listen to it later. So during the question and answer period, please come to the microphone to ask your question. Thank you. Our speakers will be introduced by James Sanders, class of 1998. James is the Vice President of the San Antonio Alumni Chapter and a financial advisor with Morgan Stanley Smith Barney. James.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mary Kay. I always have mixed emotions about the applause that I get on the way to the podium. I'm not really sure what it's for, but I thank you for that. So it's my pleasure to introduce Barbara and Gordon MacAlpine, and I'm very excited about one of the benefits of sitting at the reserve table is you always get a little bit of a taste of what the lecture is going to be about prior to it actually being discussed with the broader public. So I've got some pretty good idea what's going to happen. I'm very excited. Barbara and Gordon were undergraduates at Earlham College, where Barbara majored in psychology and he in physics. At the University of Wisconsin, Barbara earned a master's degree in library science, and Gordon received his Ph.D. in astronomy. Barbara was a librarian at the University of Michigan before coming to Trinity in 2000. Her current titles are Associate Professor and Science Librarian at the Coates Library, and she teaches first-year seminars on environmental sustainability. Gordon retired as Emeritus Professor of Astronomy at the University of Michigan, and then came to Trinity as the Charles A. Zilker Distinguished Professor of Physics and Astronomy in the fall of 1999. His principal research activities have involved the origins of the universe and its contents. In addition, his interests in scientific evidence for human-caused climate change have led him to teach new classes on energy, the Earth's changing environment, and global warming. So will you please help me welcome both Barbara and Gordon MacAlpine to the podium. Thank you.
Hello? Nope, not yet.
Oh, did you turn it on?
Hello? I'll just. Okay, thank you, James. As suggested in the introduction, Barbara and I are particularly interested in providing information and experiences to students so they can become future stewards of our planet. And with that in mind, back in 2009, we established with student help, we set up I'm trying to find the little button. It was there. Yes. With student help, we set up the Trinity Organic Gardens, and they're over by the library. And 4 classes of students have planted those gardens, grown vegetables, and hopefully learned a lot from doing that. In 2008, we took part in a faculty symposium in Costa Rica, organized partly by the Associated Colleges of the South. And the idea there was to go down to the cloud forest and experience things for ourselves so we could come back and do a better job of teaching our classes, but also to experience what students would experience if they went down there for foreign study. Then in 2010, just last year, we had another opportunity to participate with an institute for the International Education of Students program, a faculty program, in the Amazon in Ecuador. And again, the idea was to go down, learn about biodiversity and ecosystems, and experience what students would experience if they were to go there. In terms of what students are experiencing, Trinity is now offering incredible opportunities in sustainability studies and environmental studies with a new environmental studies program. Now, why should we be so interested in the environment? And why should students become, I didn't mean to, hold it, I didn't mean to do that. I'm getting rid of this. This is okay, well, I have to go back now. There it is, okay. This is an animated slide that I used in classes, but I didn't want to go through all of it here. Sorry about that.
You got the best.
But it illustrates some recent extreme alterations on our planet. On this axis, we have amounts of different things with different scales. On this axis, years, starting in 1700, going to 2000, here we are about 2010, 2011, and then going on into the future. And going way, way, way back, thousands of years, you can imagine all of these lines were flat, and then starting in about 1900, something changed dramatically on this planet. Something that never happened before. And the dark line represents fossil fuel use. Starting around 1900, we started mining, digging up, sucking up coal, oil, and natural gas. And the fossil fuel use is actually, in terms of the amount of fossil fuels, is peaking now. It has to peak soon. It has to drop off because it's not sustainable. These are not renewable fuels. And along with fossil fuel use, the human population has quadrupled since about 1900. Fossil fuels provided all kinds of wonderful things. They provided energy, medicines, fertilizers for growing food, transportation for transporting food, leisure time, and so on, and the population consequently shot up. Along with the population shooting up, along with that, people have been using more and more fossil fuels, and when you burn fossil fuels, you create carbon dioxide. And so carbon dioxide has also been going up since about 1900 in our atmosphere. We're injecting about, right now, about 33 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere each year. And as a result of that, as a result of the carbon dioxide absorbing heat from the Earth that's trying to get back out into space and radiating it back down to us in the greenhouse effect, the temperature at the surface of the Earth has been going up. And that is what we now call climate change or global warming. So, why should we be so interested in that? Well, this is a diagram from a group called Living Planet Index. They're associated with the World Wildlife Fund, with the Zoological Society of London, and United Nations Environmental Program. They track species and extinction of species. They look at biodiversity on the planet. And they started doing this back around 1970, and that's set at 1 on this scale. And then as you consider things like freshwater species, well, we had the Clean Water Act, but then it's dropped off. Marine species, terrestrial species, they're all dropping off. And the overall index there in yellow, representing everything, has dropped off by about 30% just since 1970. Species are dying now, are becoming extinct now, faster than they have since an asteroid hit this planet 65 million years ago. And we're losing about 27,000 species per year that we know of. And the drivers include, well, global warming, pollution, loss of habitat, destruction of ecosystems, generally careless behavior, overexploitation, denial, all kinds of things. And these are the kinds of things we want students to learn about, and so that they can do their best to stop this decline if we possibly can.
Okay. See how this works. So in 2009, I was teaching a first-year seminar on environmental issues. He was teaching sort of an environmental physics class. We decided, because we were longtime gardeners anyway, that this would be a golden opportunity to create some organic gardens here on campus and have our students go through the process of learning how to plant and so forth. So if you know Laurie Auditorium, there's a green hill opposite that which was covered with grass. Early in January, the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds went out there with the pickaxe and the shovels and everything else. And starting with this, they ended up creating some gardens. Planting time, again, was probably early February. We had to figure out when things wouldn't freeze and also when we wouldn't hit the end of the semester and it would be too warm. So we had planting going on, either seeds or little plants themselves. We had a variety of things that we thought should be able to make it. This was shortly after planting, and this was maybe a couple of months later. Oh, I thought we were going to dump the lights slightly.
Oh, we could. Can we dim the lights a little bit?
Green looks greener in the dark. So this was a pretty successful garden as far as the students were concerned. We had a few problems with squirrels and assorted other pests, but by and large, they did pretty well. You can see tomatoes out there. Lettuce usually got demolished at some point by the squirrels, but we tried. A number of things worked out pretty well, and the students were asked to visit their gardens 3 times a week to do weeding, to take measurements and whatnot, so that they really were supposed to be in the process. So we had Brussels sprouts, which was exciting. I'd never grown that before. Radishes were totally successful. If you've never gardened in Texas, you might find that these would be wonderful to grow. And at the end of the semester, we had the students write a kind of reflective piece on what they had gotten out of the gardening. And we've given you just a few samples here, and I'll give you a chance to look at it. I think is it this button? I think this is probably the most telling. The interesting thing was that most of the students had never gardened, and so they didn't know what to expect. They didn't necessarily know a weed from a bean or whatever. So we had a little bit of an issue that way. What we were really hoping to do was to have them learn that local food is something you can do and that it's good for you. The average food travels about 1,500 miles. We really think it's important for people to realize that stuff that is here locally is better environmentally for all kinds of reasons. So these were some of the lessons that we were trying to get across to the students. Carol.
My turn again.
Do you want this, or shall I poke for you?
Okay. So when we found out we were going to get to go to Monteverde, Costa Rica, with the Associated Colleges of the South, we started preparing for that trip diligently. And Barbara was reading all about saving the earth, and I was practicing to ride the Ziplines. For those of you who aren't aware of what is available in Monteverde, there is the largest rainforest or cloud forest preserve in the world there, and there's the largest series of zip lines. And people like to go and ride those, and so I started practicing, and the leader of the group, a professor from Rollins College, said, "Now I hope none of you will ride the zip lines," because he didn't consider them ecologically useful or beneficial in any way. So anyway, I was getting ready. And here is Monteverde. This is the University of Georgia campus station there. As you can see, it is an absolutely gorgeous cloud forest. And all these little red things, those are buildings in the University of Georgia station. We were particularly interested in going there because this was a place where Trinity students would be welcome, we were told. And in here they have dorms, a kitchen, administrative buildings. They have labs where faculty from around the country are carrying out scientific work. Over here is a botanical garden the students can work in. Over here is an organic garden that they use to feed themselves. Or we saw them walking into town and back. Some of them go into town and work at the cheese factory. They go somewhere and they plant trees. It's a wonderful place. And here's a close-up look so you can see it really does have buildings nestled there in the trees. These two are dorms. And so this is one way in which students can go there and experience the cloud forest and an amazing ecosystem. Another way...
Yes, there's a student named Amanda Martinez, whose father, Ernest, works with us in the library. And Amanda graduated 2 years ago, but while she was at Trinity, she went to Monteverde as a study abroad participant. She lived with a host family in Monteverde, so she wasn't on the UGA campus, but she apparently had a fabulous time, and she is now working for AmeriCorps doing environmental projects. So it appears that her interests and her passion have carried on, which is neat.
The greatest thing there, and the thing we were most interested in and excited about, along with riding the zip lines, was the cloud forest itself. It's in a perpetual cloud, and as you can see, it's an absolutely magical place. This is our group. This is a tour guide they gave us to take us into the cloud forest. And you get in there, and there are monkeys and birds and animals everywhere. It's like a giant cathedral. And there are more than 35,000 acres of reserve there. Some Quakers started out in 1972 establishing a small cloud forest preserve. And then as people and the government became more interested, it expanded over and over and over again until it's got more than 35,000 acres, and there are at least a couple of thousand species of mammals, birds, amphibians, snakes, and so on. It's just an absolutely terrific place. And the leader of our group took us there right away. And then we all made arrangements to go ride the zip lines. And he announced that he was going back to the cloud forest. Any of us who wanted to go with him could do so, but he was happy. He knew we wanted to ride the zip lines. Nobody rode the zip lines at all, because he kept giving us opportunities to go back into the cloud forest, which is one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. These are just a couple of the trees that we saw. This is a strangler fig. These are all our own pictures. And a bird drops a fig seed way up high in a tree, up in the canopy. These are very high trees. and it sticks up there. It starts to grow, and its roots come all the way down into the ground as the tree itself is up where it can get sunshine. And the roots use all the nutrients, and then the tree that was in the middle that the thing landed on to begin with dies. And so you have this incredible root system that's a giant hollow tree reaching up. These were everywhere, and you could climb on. Well, we didn't climb on them because we didn't want to destroy anything. And the monkey tail ferns were also absolutely amazing, just to name a couple of things. I'll click this way.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
So there were a lot of orchids, as I guess one might have expected. This is just one that we took. The thing that was perhaps most surprising to me was that there were so many different kinds. Some of them looked sort of normal size. There were a few that were about the size of my little fingernail. So they range size, color, and everything. They were a total thrill for people that like flowers and colors. So that was neat. This is on the kind of along the top of the canopy or close to the top. What we were doing here, and you can probably see binoculars if you look hard, is that we were looking for a particular bird called the Quetzal. This is a gorgeous, extravagant bird that lives in the tropical forests. Is hard to see even though it's very colorful, and so everyone was kind of walking along, gazing up with their binoculars, trying to see the thing. And I knew I was having no luck because all I could see was leaves everywhere. And at one point I saw a little green rag hanging down from somewhere up top in the trees, and I thought that was kind of weird. And I couldn't see anything but this little rag, so I asked our guide, and he stuck his binoculars on it, and lo and behold, it was a Quetzal. And of course then everyone flocked to see it. It was totally exciting. And so this is what we saw.
Well, that's with a camera.
Yeah, this is his picture. Can you, here. No, thank you. So if you're not familiar with the Quetzal, the head, where did it go?
You have to shake it.
Oh, okay. You're right. The head is a little piece up there, and then there's this huge extravagant tail. And because you don't get the full-blown effect here, we borrowed another picture from probably something that we shouldn't have borrowed from. But this is what it looks like in real life. So you can see that green tail, which is all that I was seeing, hanging out of the leaves, looks like a little green rag. So anyway.
When Barbara first saw this bird, we weren't supposed to get to see this. They said, you don't have a chance. When she first saw it, I was on one end of the bridge and she was over near the middle, and she yelled, Quetzal. And I thought she was saying, ¿Qué tal? Which is like, what up? And I didn't know what to do. But eventually I caught on. It's amazing.
Anyway, that was a totally great experience. The one thing that we didn't see that we, of course, would love to have had was the golden toad, which was kind of the symbol of endangered and extinct species at this point. They went extinct in 2004 and therefore are no more. So that was one that we were not able to look at. And I'll pass it on to you.
Okay, from, well, not directly from Monteverde. We came back here for a couple of years. And then in 2010, with the IES, with a faculty studies seminar, we went to Quito, Ecuador. And the idea was to go into the Amazon and to go to the Galapagos Islands. And I took this picture out of the window of the plane. Were you all aware that Ecuador has the 2 highest mountains in the world? Anybody know the name of the highest mountain in the world?
Mount Everest.
Well, that's the highest above sea level. But the 2 highest mountains in the world, if you measure from the center of the Earth up, are both in Ecuador. And because it's on the equator and the Earth is spinning, it's thicker at the equator. So as you go from the center to the mountaintop, it's actually farther than from the center to the mountaintop for Mount Everest.
And the name is?
And the name is? Why did you say that? It's in my pocket.
Okay, good enough. It's not here.
So we got there, and one of the first things we did was we went to various classes. They had classroom lectures for us, and they brought in all kinds of wonderful, distinguished people. and they said, tonight you're going to get to meet some other distinguished people. You're going to go to the home family of a particular student that we selected for each one of you, and you go out here and just wait, and they'll come and pick you up. And so we went out and waited, and I got tapped on the shoulder, and lo and behold, it was Philip Schnorbach, a student from Trinity, and he was there as an IES student in this program, staying with a wonderful home family there in Quito. And it was just an absolute shock to see him there, because he had just taken an environmental course from me the semester before. Anyway, it was just absolutely fantastic. After that, we set off into the Amazon. And we were riding in what they call a canoe, which is a very large canoe, powerboat canoe. And we were heading deep into the Amazon on the Napo River. And we all started out full of anticipation. Everybody's sitting along the edges, looking out at all the wonderful sights. And eventually we had to come ashore. And we went through a big oil area. There are major oil and gas efforts going on in Ecuador. And we went through a major oil and gas area. You think that they check you out carefully when you go to get on an airplane. You should try going into an oil and gas area in Ecuador. We weren't allowed to take pictures. Everybody had an automatic weapon but us. And we rode by truck through this area for several hours as other trucks were whizzing by, and we weren't allowed to stop. So they made sure that we took care of ourselves before we set out. But once we got to the other side, it was fantastic, because there was this tributary of the Napo called the Tippertiny River. And another boat was waiting for us. And we got in that one and headed down the Tippertiny. And that was a long ride. And everybody was kind of getting tired. So they're no longer sitting around the edges staring out. They're just lying around wherever they can. And we had all kinds of gear. We had to bring in all our own food and so on. And by the way, this particular person who was on the trip is named Keith Quetzal, and he's from Austin College, just up the way in Texas. So it was worth it. It was a long, hard day. Okay, but we finally arrived at the biodiversity station, the Tippertiny station, which is run by the University of San Francisco in Quito. And they got jaguars. We didn't see a jaguar. We almost saw a giant tapir. We found its tracks. And they got all kinds of monkeys and things. And the diversity there, the biodiversity, is literally estimated to be the highest per unit area on the planet. It's 1,600 acres at the Tippertiny station, and across the way is the Yasuni National Preserve. And again, in terms of biodiversity of animals, plants, and so on, it's probably the highest in the world. And it's such an amazing place. We thought this sign was definitely appropriate.
Okay, I know I want that. Okay. So here's where we lived. I don't know how well you can pick this up. There were little huts with 2 or 3 people able to stay in them. They were made of bamboo. They had these metal roofs, which you can kind of see the shiny there. Towards the back, there are some green things up in the air that are water tanks. The water was pulled out of the Tippertiny, processed, I guess, slightly, and then came back down into the cabin through a gravity pull. So we spent, I think it was 3 nights in these wonderful cabins, and at night, I don't know what creatures were out there, monkeys or whatever, but there was almost a constant hail of noise as they were throwing things at the roof, and those metal roofs really added to the effect. It was really quite charming. So what I'd like to do now, if this will work, is can you douse all the lights? So what I want you to do is to think to yourself, all right, I am somewhere in the jungles of the Amazon. It's still dawn, very, very early in the day, and with luck, we'll be able to hear something. Oh. Wow.
Click on the image.
I can't make the mouse. Oh, there I am. I'm sorry. I thought it was.
On the image.
No. So what do you think you were hearing? Yes.
Gordon snoring?
Oh! Thank you. And any thoughts? You don't have to name particular species, but what kinds of things do you think you were hearing? Birds for sure. Monkeys for sure.
Sounds like a squeaky wheel.
Could be, I doubt it. There was a great deal of noise going on for sure from various animals. We were pretty sure there were some woolly monkeys out there, and we saw some later. Definitely the bird life was just phenomenal, and a lot of those creatures were creating noise too. So it was a totally jungle experience. I don't know how else to describe it. We mentioned that there is oil activity in that general area. You can see some of it here. Not only were we hearing all the great animal noises and birds and whatnot, but there was this sort of low pulsing sound that you could hear virtually all of the time, which, as it turned out, were the oil wells that are some 30 to 50 kilometers away. So there is the fear of encroachment and what that would do to the habitat. And the wells would be burning off the natural gas, and so as we were going down the river, we could occasionally see the little flames going up. You can add to that if you want to.
No.
Okay, fine. So this was the Tipitini River, very strong current. We were all encouraged to jump in with our lifeboat, our life jackets. The current, as it turns out, was strong enough that many times you just kind of got swept down the river. I didn't do it, he did. I mean, I'm not that keen on the water, I guess. But the theory was that if you got swept away too far, just stay in the water with your life jacket on, and they would send out a boat to pick you up and bring you back. So he did. For me, fishing was a little more interesting. And we spent one part of an afternoon fishing for piranha, and this was what they look like.
She actually caught that one where I was swimming.
Oh, I think you're on.
Okay. So we attended some classes. Students who go there would have opportunities to attend classes. They would do projects and so on. Most of what we did was just going out into the jungle and seeing the ecosystem and the biodiversity there. And here's Barbara heading out into the jungle. And this is now a rainforest, and it was always raining a little bit, and it was always wet. So we had to wear these special boots that they gave us as we're slogging through the mud, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. And as we're heading out, you see all kinds of trees, lots and lots of little ones, but also really big ones, just unimaginably big. This is a giant kapok, and you think, well, okay, there's the bottom. Does it have a top that's way up there? Yes, we were headed for the top. They like to get you up into the canopy so that you can see the biodiversity up there. See the animal life, the plant life, and so on up there. And they had built this tower. Here I am negotiating the tower along with Akim Stegun. He was the head of the IES in the University of Freiburg in Germany. And this is more than 40 meters up to the first little ladder or platform walkway that you get to walk on. Here's one of the walkways, and these go from tree to tree. And then they have more ladders, and you can climb up even higher. But these are wet, they're soaking, it's raining. And all we're wearing is these boots that don't fit us, and they're really slick. I was afraid. But what we could see up there, was absolutely amazing.
So this is a Nun Bird, which is, lives pretty much in South America. It's a part of the puffbird family, which sounds a little odd, but we had never heard of it or seen it before, and that was one of the things we were able to pick up. The large kind of purplish plant next to it is one of the many bromeliads that are everywhere down there. As we were up on the top of the canopy, there was a great deal of macaw activity. Macaws are these large parrots. Scarlet macaws flying by 2 or 3 at a time. And then someone would yell, "Oh, there's a blue and yellow one." That's what they're called, the blue and yellow macaw.
The other ones are blue and yellow,
Yeah, no, I mean, so we were seeing macaws of various kinds. There's a red and green one, whatever, but anyway, it was just macaw country, and it was very, very exciting to see. This is the woolly monkey, probably not the one that we heard at night, or early dawn. It could have been. There were monkeys trying to be fairly private, so they were sometimes a little hard to pick up, but they were, you could just see them swinging just like monkeys are supposed to in the trees from one tree to another. It's kind of neat. And the golden mantle tamarin, which again is South American. They're thinking, right now it's sort of on a near threatened list as far as extinction is concerned, but the big worry is that because of the kind of habitat they need, if the oil and gas production moves into that area to a greater extent, it's going to start really affecting the habitat, and that in turn will affect the number of animals that are going to be able to live. So the forecast is not too good at this point. I think you get the banana.
Okay, in addition to daytime hikes, we went out in the well after dark to see what was in the jungle after dark. And we found things like caimans and so on. And I couldn't bring pictures of everything we saw, but this is a picture I took of a banana spider. And you may all have heard there are these highly poisonous spiders that hide in your bananas, and you should look for them when you get your bananas at H-E-B. How could they possibly hide in your bananas? This thing was as big as my hand. So there's a banana spider. And there was another spider that was even bigger, called a scorpion spider. And it was dark. We walk along the pathway with our little flashlights shining down looking for things. And when we find something, then we take a picture of it. Unfortunately, we flash it, which probably wasn't good for it. But there was this really, really even bigger spider called a scorpion spider. And I flashed it several times. I mean, just trying to take a picture with a little flash camera. Every time it jumped before I could get the picture. So all I've got is 3 pieces of ground for that. But this one posed very nicely, a blunt-headed tree snake. There were lots of other kinds of animal life that we saw and took pictures of, and we don't have time to have them all here now. But in addition to animal life, there were incredible people that we got to meet. Guides who had lived in the area, Indians in the area, Waorani Indians, and students could meet all these people as well. And in this particular case, Yolanda Kakabatse is the president of the World Wildlife Fund, and she's a former interior minister in Ecuador. And these are the kinds of people, when you go to these places, these are the kinds of people you rub shoulders with and learn from. Oh, by the way, we're in a Waorani village. So these are some of their houses out here. And we also saw, in walking through Yasuni, the big biodiversity preserve, we came upon a Waorani encampment. We couldn't see them. They probably just didn't want us to see them, so we went right through that. We were looking for a giant tapir, which we also didn't see.
So after we finished in the Amazon, we went back to Quito for a couple of days, and then the finale of the trip was an excursion into the Galapagos, and that involved flying to one of the islands and then taking boats to whatever other island we were headed for, and we stopped at, I think, 3 different ones. We, of course, were met by the iguanas, which were classic. The cool thing about the Galapagos is that you hear about it all your life and you think, oh, that must be wonderful. And you see all these great pictures in National Geographic or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're there, and by golly, those things are real. So the iguanas were welcoming us. The Galapagos Doug, which I was not familiar with before, but it certainly gives you an eyeful. Finches, those of you that are Darwin fans are perhaps aware that his study of the finches was one of the things that led to his theory of evolution. And so we have two pictures here. I don't know whether I can do this or not, of two different finches. And the thing that you want to center on is their beaks. So the Warbler Finch has that sort of more pointy beak that would be important in terms of the kind of food that it was eating. And the woodpecker finch, I think you can see that it has a much bigger and more solid beak on it. And each different finches live on different islands and evolved accordingly depending on their food supply and their other needs. So it was kind of neat to see that the real finches that we've heard about all our lives. And I think you get the next one.
Okay, so we all heard that it was the finches of Galapagos that led Darwin to his theory of evolution. Actually, it was the mockingbird. I actually took this picture of a mockingbird there at the Darwin Research Station on one of the islands, Santa Cruz. When Darwin first got there in 1835, the first thing he saw that he caught and studied was a mockingbird. And just like the finches, the mockingbirds live on different islands. There are at least 8 islands there. And on each island, things evolved differently. And he noticed that the mockingbirds on the different islands had different characteristics. So it was really the mockingbird. Just wanted to point that out. All right. And of course, we had to take pictures of the blue-footed boobies. There are their feet. Okay. Yes. Okay. And of course, we couldn't come back without a picture of one of the turtles. We actually got to pet the turtles. I'm not sure they knew we were petting them. But this particular turtle is about 6 feet long, and he weighs about 900 pounds. He's probably well over 100 years old. They live up to 200 years or so. And the turtles have an amazing story behind them. They've been there for millions of years. They evolved, the islands evolved along with them. On each island, the turtles have different characteristics. Some of them have shells that look like big saddles, and that's where the name Galapagos came from. That's the name of a saddle. And there were hundreds of thousands of turtles on the islands up until about 1700. And then sailors and merchants discovered that the turtles have such slow metabolic systems that you can store them in the hold of your ship without refrigeration, and they don't spoil. So they came into the Galapagos Islands and hauled the turtles off by the thousands, just stacking them in the holds of their ships so they could have food for long periods of time. Turtles would just lie there. And they hauled off, literally, it's estimated, as many as 200,000 turtles. And so, whereas lots were still left when Darwin was there, as of 1970, on all of the islands, the turtle population was only down to about 3,000. And through a lot of diligent work, maybe some of you have heard of Lonesome George. Lonesome George, at least 3 species became extinct and a couple more almost extinct. And for one of the almost extinct species, there was one left, Lonesome George. And they've been trying to breed Lonesome George with females from another species that's very close, from a place called Wolf Volcano. And they're trying to breed Lonesome George so they can try to revive that species as best they can. But overall, at the Darwin Research Station, we got to go through and see where they've got the hatchlings of turtles and see how they grow them for about 4 years, and then they go put them back into the wild. And they've rejuvenated some of the species that were dying off, and they're up to about 20,000 turtles now. So to me, that's a great success story. And another thing that I absolutely loved about the islands was they're solar powered. And so they've got sustainable, renewable energy there. Of course they do. Where else are they going to get it? As Barbara was rubbing shoulders with a very important person, I did the same. This is Gunter Reck, and he was lecturing to us. He has been working in the Galapagos Islands for more than 30 years. He's the former director of the Charles Darwin Research Station there. In fact, I think he may have established the Darwin Research Station there. This is the kind of person that students, this could be a student, this is the kind of person that students can go and learn from and meet if they go on these trips.
So this was the final group. We didn't say too much about this group. These were faculty from universities and colleges, a lot of small colleges around the country. One person from Texas, as he indicated, and the rest were from other places. Most of them had a very firm grounding in the sciences. They were biologists, ecologists, geologists, people that could walk out into the field and say, oh, that's a Nun Bird or that's a whatever, whereas we kind of ran behind and thought it was cool. So we learned a tremendous amount from them. As you can see by the indication here, we didn't feel that we necessarily had as much to offer, but I'm sure we were as enthusiastic as anybody else there. So what we did is try to experience at least a little bit of what our students would be enjoying if they were going down there on a study abroad program. We didn't do everything that they do, obviously, but what we found was that it was an amazing place to be, and it only strengthened our own amazement at really the biodiversity and the potential for students being able to appreciate that and to open their eyes to new experiences also. And it also reinforced for us a deep need to try to preserve what we have right now. Thank you. Questions? Yes. Oh.
Butterflies.
Oh.
My wife and I are very interested in lepidoptery. We wondered if you saw anything interesting.
Yes, they were all over the place. There were a lot of small areas where people would put out some kind of fruit as just an attractor for the butterflies. I'm sure we must have some pictures somewhere because we were truly amazed by that. But yes, they are very, very prominent. You would love it. The other thing we didn't mention was that both places have a huge number of hummingbirds, and if you find those enticing, as I do, it was quite an experience. Yes, sir.
Is Trinity offering students a degree in environmental studies, or is it just part of the biology department or something?
No, this year they've actually initiated an environmental studies major. So yes, as of kind of now or in the very near future, students will be able to leave with that.
What is environmentally wrong with ziplines?
I'll let you address that one.
For me, what was wrong with ziplines is if I rode them, I wouldn't get to go into the cloud forest again. They're an encroachment into a natural area. There's a business there. They're trying to coexist. And as you walk through the cloud forest, you hear these things going overhead, way above the canopy, and they sound like Formula One racers. And you see these people fly overhead, and it goes as somebody's going along. And our leader from Rollins College has spent much of his life down there in Monteverde, working with people, trying to help preserve the area. And he had been there before the zip lines, and he just was not comfortable with it. but I would love to have ridden on it.
Do you have a theory about what caused the golden toad to become extinct? And along with that, how do you determine exactly when and how to name something extinct?
Well, that's a tricky one. I think the original thought was that the temperature change because of global warming was having the bad effect on the toads. More recently, I believe they have said that it was actually some kind of a disease that was taking them out, although again there could be a relationship between the disease being so prevalent and the temperature change. And in terms of how you figure out extinction, I'm sort of guessing that...
You just don't find anymore.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, really, sometimes they think something's gone extinct and then somebody finds one. But when nobody has found one in a long time and they know where to look for them, I think they ultimately get pronounced extinct. And knowing what happened to the golden toad, the Quetzal is endangered. There's another little animal that just has me scared to death that it will become extinct soon, and it will. Have you all heard of the pika here in the United States? Sometimes called the coney. It's a little animal that looks like a big mouse, but it's got big floppy ears and a rabbit's tail, and it lives in the rocks at high altitude out west in the Rocky Mountains and so on. And if you ever get up really high into the rocks, you hear ee, ee, ee. Those are the pikas. Well, you used to hear that. But as it gets warmer, animals are moving north. We can actually track how animals are moving farther and farther north, migrating, as it gets too warm for them closer to the equator. And in the case of the pikas, they need the cool up near the higher altitude up in those rocks. Up above 12,000 feet, that used to be the case. Now they need to be much higher than that as it's warming up. And they can't go down and north because they're not going to find the right environment. All they can do is go higher. And as they go higher and higher, they've reached their peak. And so the pika are going to become extinct. And so every chance we get, we go out west and listen for them. And when we don't hear any more or don't see any more, then we'll figure they're gone.
Barbara, I remember you telling a cute story about monkeys sitting on your shoulder and trying to steal your potato chips. I think we'll hear that story again.
Okay, during one of our transitions, I guess coming back from the Amazon, we stopped we got off of the canoe and then had a time that we had to wait before we got a bus to another river or whatever. It was a long trip. And there was a little place where they sold food and whatnot, and so people bought a little bit to eat and we all sat down at picnic tables. Well, it's like any other tourist place, I suppose. All of a sudden, these small monkeys appeared and had obviously no fear of people, so they were sitting on the table, reaching their little hands in and grabbing your food. I got kind of annoyed with them. It seemed totally rude. But at one point, one of them sat on my shoulder, and then sometimes they were on people's heads. I mean, again, they were just sort of clambering all over you. So it was clearly not life in the wilds, but it was the wildlife adapting to people in the area. They were cute, but I got mad.
Looks like you didn't have any fortune to face an anaconda there. Is it rare in that area? I hear that it's pretty prominent in the Amazon area.
They do have anacondas there. And we did go out at night, during the day and at night, on the river and look for them. We did see caiman, but we did not see an anaconda. They were hiding from us, apparently. Interestingly, when the people would go into the river to swim, I swam from the shore, and the current was so strong I decided not to do it again, and I gulped down some water by accident and was sick for a day. But some of the people would bail out of the canoe and swim. And I was constantly watching them to see if an anaconda or something came up. They did the same thing in the Galapagos Islands. We swam in the ocean a bit, but got real tired quick.
And swallowed a lot of salt water.
And some of them got out and swam quite far in the oceans. And after we pulled up our group, because they were getting too far apart with the current, so we pulled them back onto the boat. And I was standing there looking over the edge of the boat, and a huge shark came up. I mean, a really big white shark. So we decided we weren't going to do that. Other questions?
All right, well, we want to definitely thank you guys for an outstanding talk and definitely some thought-provoking pictures and some wonderful experience. So thanks again, Barbara and Gordon. And also for everyone that's joined us this afternoon, we want to thank you for coming to the lecture. Keep in mind that this is something that we do every year. And so we have 5 more lectures starting in January and to go through May. So please keep an eye on your mailbox. We'll be sending you a postcard with a list of next year's speakers and topics. So thank you again for coming. Have a great afternoon.